Welcome to the CBP Spring Virtual Conference. Whipfly is proud to be a CBP partner and presenting sponsor. I'm TJ O'Neill, also known as the Thirsty CPA, and help lead our firm's craft brewery team. We offer a full lineup of solutions, including accounting and tax, digital strategies, business advisory, and strategic planning services. Our firm's been working with breweries, wineries, and distilleries for decades. So whether you're a startup or looking to expand, we just might surprise you with a new perspective to transform your business. You can learn more at whipfly.com. Remember, that's Whipfly, W-I-P-F-L-I, not Whipfly. I hope you're enjoying the conference. Cheers.
Hello, and thank you for joining me for my presentation titled Packaging is Gatekeeper to Your Brand. Roger Kissling from Ironheart Canning, and I'm grateful to be back on CBP. Not only am I Vice President of Sales and Client Management, I'm also a partner in the business for a little over half of Ironheart's history. Been working with Ironheart for about 7 years now. Little bit of information. I always put a little slide about Ironheart so you know where the presentation and the information I'm about to present, which I hope is fun to listen to and informative, but where that experience is coming from. So we began operations in July of 2013 in the Northeast. Actually, started one guy in a truck in Connecticut, and through organic expansion and strategic acquisition, we now run 80 plus canning lines in over 27 states of geography. So you see the map there on the inset, Minnesota to Alabama and Maine to Florida. Approximately 70 to 80 million cans a year is what we've been doing. And, we're just about to crest the 500 million cans worth of filling experience, which is a nice milestone for us. Wide variety of can sizes and products of all types as well. Our roots are in craft beer. It's in our blood as well, but we do cider, wine, RTDs, coffee, non-alcoholic, CBD, hemp, cannabis now, a variety, beverages of all types. Our administrative offices are up in Manchester, New Hampshire, and we have quality control and lab services spread throughout the company, but main based in Minnesota and also in Pennsylvania. So what I'm here to talk to you about today, and what are the costs of poor quality? This was fun for me because I actually got to dig through the old photograph archives. So as I go through the presentation and present the different components of quality and how that they could affect customer experience, I was able to dig up some fun photographs that I think you guys will all enjoy. But the overarching philosophy, right, is packaging is the gatekeeper to your beer and to your brand. Something I say all of the time is your beer will only be as good as the packaging process, and packaging can only make the beer worse, right? Philosophy. It's more than philosophy, it's actually true, right? So the canning will not make your beer any better. It's the last step in the production process. So if you don't maintain quality during canning, it will completely erase any care or rigor or work that you put in during the previous phases of production. You can make the best Kolsch that the world has ever tasted. But if you put it all into cans, if you put it all in a package and that packaging process fails you, nobody will ever know. And this is just a little little morsel that I pulled. Why is consistency the overriding factor? Well, it's because it's not the 100, it's not the 1,000 perfectly packaged, I'm just going to say cans, perfectly packaged cans that make the difference. It's the one that there was a mistake on that will cause you an issue. It's not the 100 production runs, the 100 packaging runs that go well. It's the one that has a problem that will lead to a heavy cost. But according to PwC's Future Customer Experience, about 32% of customers will leave your brand after just one bad experience. And even if they love your brand and you have brand equity, 60%, 2 out of 3 people will walk away after 2 bad experiences. I would argue that for craft beer, given the competitive landscape, that might even be optimistic, right? I think with all the options on the shelf, you don't have multiple chances to get that customer to buy your brand again. If they have one bad experience, they likely will never come back. So once again, consistency is the overriding factor when it comes to packaging as well. So what we're going to cover on these next slides. Canning equipment, of course, those are the tools we use. Beer preparation and conditions and how that affects quality. Big one here, seam integrity, obviously as it relates to canning. Machine cleanliness, CIP, and sanitation practices. Quality filling, measurables and goals. So this is basically filling accuracy, right? Weights, checks, etc. Machine condition and operational performance, right? So how your machine is maintained and issues with the machine that could affect quality. And then back to standards of the operator, because these machines, most of these canning machines, inline fillers, which we focus on, have most experience with, they're very operator driven, right? So expertise with the equipment and with filling of beer, and then circle back to the philosophies of packaging, right? Because if it's a man or woman standing behind the canning line, their skill is going to equal quality or lack thereof. And then the last three I'll group together, but it's going to be an archiving and testing program, repeatable SOPs and best practices, and then can compatibility and storage issues on the back end. Okay, so the tools we use, canning equipment. The big points here, not all canning equipment is created equal. There are more and more options on the market all the time, different sizes, different throughputs, different costs, and of course, differing levels of quality. Probably the biggest differentiator from a quality perspective can be the seaming operation itself. So that's something to pay attention to, the quality of the seamer on any piece of equipment that you would use. But I'm going to talk about seaming a little bit separately, so I'm not going to hone in on that. Obviously, if everybody had a blank check, there'd be a Crohn's or a Labinger parked in every brewery across the country. That's not the case, right? So we're all making budget decisions, but as capital costs increase, you'd hope, the goal would be that variability in quality would decrease. So you get a better piece of equipment that's more reliable. The inverse, of course, is capital costs decrease. You can still get consistency, you can still get quality, but the need for experience and expertise of that operator increases, right? I often hear it said, with a hand seamer and a beer gun, can you get fantastic? Can you have high quality filling of cans? Sure, you can, but consistency is very difficult. I think anybody who fills crowlers at the behind in your tap room knows that depending on who's filling that crowler, you can get one that might last a while, and you get one that's going to be pretty tired very quickly. So throughput and automation also increases, obviously, with a higher price tag, and but as that goes down, as you spend less on throughput and automation, then labor costs do increase per case. But the important thing here is that I would argue that the skill of the operator equals quality. So the need for greater skill goes up. Sometimes it's counterintuitive, right? You have a more expensive piece of equipment, you should be paying somebody more to run it. True, but it's funny. I'd argue that sometimes the inverse is true. As you're battling with a piece of equipment that takes more skill to operate, or that has its idiosyncrasies, you can overcome that through skill of the operator. So who's in charge of your packaging, right? If you have a very basic process, but you have your best guy on it, your lead brewer, your head brewer, who cares most about the product, somebody who's an owner in the business, right? You could still have quality, but that's not always what I see out in the marketplace sometimes, right? It's like packaging is the job that falls to the assistant or falls to somebody with less experience, and that can cause issues. I'll be up front. Ironheart uses all Wild Goose canning lines, so that's where just a lot of our experience and information comes from. But I'm saying this because you don't need $1 million machines. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to make what I'm trying to communicate is that understanding the limitations of what you're working with, understanding the areas that need the most attention or have the most opportunity for something to go wrong, focusing your attention and resources on those, and knowing what your setup is key to get to having consistency and not allowing issues to go out in the market. Labelers, it's sometimes not focused on from a quality perspective, but I hate a bummer of a label when it's misapplied or it doesn't go on well. It's not a good look for the brand, and it's not a good customer experience. I think I'll circle back to that a little bit later on here. Ironheart, we use all Quadrell labelers. We find that they have a lot more adjustments and it's nice and robust. But labels themselves, I would say find the right producer that works for you, gives you the right customer service, and has offers good consistent quality and stands behind their product. We always work with InTouch and have for years at Ironheart Canning, so I can recommend them. And I'll show you what our recommendations are for labels on the next slide here, because the label itself, obviously, if you get the wrong label, label application becomes very difficult. If you get the right label, it can make it a lot easier. So we recommend a polypropylene bot material with a cold wet apply adhesive for all of our labels. We require clear plastic poly liner, as label backing, so that the paper backing, so that it doesn't rip as it goes through the labeler. That causes stoppages, that causes additional shorts. So we use the polyplastic liner on all of them. We don't want the clear or vanish bot material. It's too thin, doesn't adhere to cans, and can show streaking. And we don't like vinyl or metallic paper. It just has trouble with application adherence. Metallic layers, yes, metallic coloring on the labels all work fine as long as we're on the regular one. And finally, really don't recommend any clear see-through label designs where you have clear plastic that you can see through to the metallic of the can. Very often causes condensation, just doesn't look good. And you'll see it streaking and condensation behind the clear part. So these are our recommendations. The next topic, consistent, accurate beer conditions. So the liquid preparation of the beer before packaging, that really sets the stage for all of the components of filling, of course. And our goal, of course, is to prevent liquid quality and filling accuracy issues. So what's the most important part here? Temperature and carbonation accuracy. We're working with inline fillers. Most people are working with inline fillers. And if you get the temp and carb right, it's very easy to dial on the machines, limit loss, but more importantly, it's easy to optimize your fills. And if you're optimizing your fills, you're getting consistency. And if you're getting consistency, that allows you to get good dissolved oxygen or minimize dissolved oxygen, minimizes stoppage. So getting that dialed in is the biggest one. I always put a note in here. We recommend a quality carbonation device. I'm skipping down to the bottom of equipment needs, but so we recommend a ZOM or Nagel or better. The ZOM is really the floor that we would like to see in our operations. But when was the last time you had it calibrated? That's something that's often overlooked as well. So get your ZOM calibrated so you know what you're measuring is accurate as well. The key here being that you don't want to, it's never a good idea. It's not recommended to push carbonation and temperature limits of the machine, because odds are you're going to get bad results, right? They have boundaries. Can adjustments be made, and can product that is at the limits be filled? Absolutely. But you increase the likelihood that you're going to have an issue. I'll give you the general spec for Ironheart that we recommend is between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 35 degrees Fahrenheit for beer product, and 2.4 volumes of carbonation to 2.6 volumes of CO2. Obviously, there's wiggle on either side, but temperature and carbonation are inversely related. So if you're shooting for a lower carb, you want the temperature a little bit higher. If you're shooting for a higher level of carb, we want the temperature a little bit lower. But, we kind of want to be on the edge, right? Fast filling, if the machine's running at full speed, flat out, it's probably not a good recipe for DO minimization. So, want to be capping on a nice pillow of foam, not have that foam collapse and evacuate that headspace through the seaming operation. But generally, if you have variability in the conditions of the beers that are coming into the canning line, you're going to have variability in the quality. I will not name names of customers that we work with, but we work with some of the best breweries in the country, and what makes them great is their attention to detail and their repeatability. So they're crazy about getting everything exactly the same every time and having it right every time. And you'd be amazed at the consistency and accuracy of filling that can be attained when you have that type of skill with beer preparation combined with a skilled operator. Dissolved oxygen, of course. Oxidized beer, which I think I have a couple of photographs of later. But low DO in tank helps low DO in package, of course. If you start with high DO in the tank, you're never going to attain quality in package, and you're going to have product issues. So monitoring dissolved oxygen in all phases of the process is what's hyper important, so that you're delivering fresh beer, you're delivering beer to the canning line, ideally that's in single digits or under 20 ppb. I think if you're doing that, it's a job well done, and there should be no issue getting beer in can under 50 ppb, with a 20 to 50 parts per billion pickup during packaging at most. And those are numbers I think that everybody can live with. Fresh beer, that's what we all love. That's what we want. So, our job is to keep it fresh, minimize DO, so that it's just as good as coming out of the tank when somebody cracks a can. Another thing with beer condition or beer prep, watch your yeast, and be mindful of additions and adjuncts that could cause post-packaging re-fermentation or continued fermentation. Everybody makes a decision for their own product, for their own brewery, but things that I've seen in the past, like keep it cold, drink it quickly, keep it cold, because that the fruit addition is going to kick off a secondary fermentation. From my perspective, playing with fire, and it only takes a short amount of time in the trunk of a car in the summer or something else for you to have an issue, customer issue, right? The other one is any type of STA1, gene containing yeast or a saison yeast. If that ends up in the wrong beer, consider it contamination. You'll have a gusher, you'll have overcarbonation. 3 months down the road, the beer's just not going to taste the same. So, that's more the brewing process. It's not my area of expertise, but be careful with repitches and do some tests to make sure that the strain, that you're not getting cross contamination there. It kind of ebbs and flows, maybe from things that come in on incoming pitches years ago, but it's just very important when you're packaging. Moving through products in the right order and repeating CIP in between products with different yeast strains, also hyper important. But equipment, like I said, quality carbonation testing device for accuracy and consistency. You need a DO meter if you're going to monitor dissolved oxygen, and then you need to be able to control the temperature on your tanks. Last one here, bulk CO2. Once again, also important for optimizing your fills and being able to run the canning line without, well, hold on a second, I got to change a CO2 bottle, or where'd my CO2 pressure go? Bulk CO2 eliminates variability in that, which then allows you to optimize your fills and fill for quality. What are we trying to avoid with this? Of course, nobody wants to open a can of beer and have it gush all over you, or God forbid, a rupture or explode. And then obviously, if you have good product conditions, you're not going to pile up a whole ton of shorts. You're not going to get underfilled cans that make it past pack out into the market all no good. Overfilling cans also not good. We'll talk about that, I think, a little bit later. Next, and obviously a big one for canning, seam integrity. Leaking seams, obviously the product if the seam is not formed properly, you're not getting a hermetic seal, you're not getting a effective closure, which means that the product in that package is going to be no good. You have flat oxidized sour beer. Just as big, if you are managing a retailer relationship or managing a distributor relationship, leaking seams and an associated recall are probably one of the worst things that you have to deal with as a producer. So it's not if you'll need adjustments to your seamer or repairs to your seamer, it's when. So as the most complicated, and quite honestly, because I think it's complicated, sometimes the most ignored part of the canning machine, it represents a major problem. Components have a lifespan. We rebuild all of our seamers every 1.5 to 2 million seams at most. We try to do it once a year in order to hit that. The parts will wear. Rollers and chucks and motors need replacement. Bearings need replacement. So all these things really need to be addressed. Should be part of your maintenance program. If you haven't had your seamer rebuilt in a long time, that's another thing that you should consider. And then understanding what causes bad seams, understanding the components of a seam, right? I recommend doubleseam.com. It's a good one. But these all have to be checked, right? So every time you fire up the canning line, we need pre-checks of pre-check your seams, op1, op2, seam thickness. Countersink gauge to estimate your cover hook and body hook, make sure you're getting the right overlap. The only end all be all for this is to throw them get a cross section, throw it on a seam imager, and know that your seam is good and within spec. Not everybody has that piece of equipment. That's why it's a nice to have. I always say listen to the line, right? If you hear clicking, you're going to catch your snappers or your skidders in body wrap cans that way as well. If it sounds funny, it usually means something funny is going on. So for those people who operate their canning line with really loud music going or earbuds in, you're limiting your ability to catch those things. Think about that. Something else that I think has caused more and more problems over time as the complexity of sourcing of cans and ends as sourcing of cans and ends has gotten more complex from a manufacturer and spec standpoint. There's more combinations. And I always say they're not all interchangeable, right? You can make things work, but Ironheart, we've discovered variability in some lid sources that we find to be unacceptable and we don't really want to use. And when you transition between different lid sources, oftentimes adjustments are necessary. So always stop, check, and adjust your seams when you're changing those lid sources. And that happens more often than you might think, even if you're sourcing through a third-party supplier that might use a couple different manufacturers. So know what you're getting. There's also different gauge ends coming, international, domestic, right? When you change the gauge of your lid, we'll need an adjustment. So if you're doing your checks, if you're doing your seam checks, you'll probably pick up on it. But unless you do it before you start up, you may have some inventory that is then in question. Last one on here is double lids. This is, you got to watch, you got to listen, and you have to train your pack out to spot them. And that's when two lids inadvertently get dropped on top of the same can. Often can happen as well when a lid from a can in front kind of floats back onto the can behind it as it goes under the skate on its way to the seamer. But they sometimes get out in the market. Hate to say it, they're not spotted, and then a customer automatically thinks that something's wrong when they go to pull the can of beer out of a pack tech and the double lid stays in the pack tech and the can's wide open, obviously. So something to keep an eye on. But In order to do this, obviously you need your hand micrometer for spot checks, go, no-go gauge, your digital micrometer for more exact checks, countersink gauge as well. And then the real nice to have is the seam imager. That's when you really know you get a full report. So, what are we trying to avoid here? Obviously, these top images are a couple of bad seams, right? Top one has very poor overlap. This one actually has an extra piece of metal folded into that seam, which is, not a good one there. And on the lower left, photos of some pleats and actual, issues within the seam during a visual inspection. And, we don't want the leaker, right? So you're folding a compressing metal to very, very low tolerances. And that's why can't be careful enough. That lower picture on the right is just a picture looking down at a double lid. If somebody gets as far as to try to open it, they're going to be puzzled as well. But so things to avoid. Next one, and a big one, obviously, is machine cleanliness, CIP, and your sanitation practices. I always say the nose knows. The canning lines should should look clean. They should also smell clean. Do not smell sour at all, ever. One recall for infected beer is obviously detrimental. People may even consume it and just think it's bad, or someone's going to think that you have a dirty brewery. Always wear gloves and safety glasses. Do not stick fingers in cans. Cans that hit the ground should be scrapped. They should not be reused. We use Burco for all of our CIP and chemical choices. I encourage you to consult if you don't already have a system that you really like, consult a professional organization, right? Consult a pro to get something down for you that works. We use a blend of different chemicals. We can't use steam, right, or heat for our canning lines because of the plastic products. So we call it our scorched earth policy, but it's a mix of hot cellar, niter for our acid drop, dioxychlor for our sanitizer. We do 2 CIPs in between each canning run. We do CIPs in between beers. And then we check that, right? Because no matter how good your process is, there is the opportunity for human error. So using test strips to verify the CIP chemistry, using ATP swabs to check the cleanliness of the exterior of your canning line, and then aqua snap readings as well to even be able to test rinse water to ensure that your CIP was effective for the internal components of the canning line that are going to touch the beer. Our go no go is 10 RLUs on it has to be under 10 RLUs on aqua snap rinse water, has to be under 30 RLUs on a surface swab, like a seamer component or the skate. Or we repeat CIP, do cleaning again before you put beer through the line. Something else learned from experience too. Try to clean your floor drains, or don't park your canning line over a floor drain you can't access that gets really gets pretty hairy underneath it. Air moves, that can be a source of contamination that can go unseen. And then also, whenever you're doing deep cleans, replacing filler lines. Seen a lot of yellow, ugly filler lines. Replacing CO2 lines, right, that get some water in them. That's an important one as well. If you see mold or if the line isn't clean, it's probably not clean, and CO2 or air is being put into that and then is being put over top of the product. That should be cleaned as well. So replacing your soft parts, gaskets, anything that touches the beer. Can't clean enough. And then this is kind of back to beer prep as well, but beware of any mixed firm over attenuating yeast strains, right? And Brett is the tough one to clean. If you are running various products with quote unquote dirty products with clean beer on the same canning line, there's certainly risk involved. It's not something that we would ever do. We have dedicated equipment that we would use for Brett, for kombucha, for anything that's mixed firm or wild. The risk is just high, right? So that's what our recommendation is. If if you have a full lab, you're able to spin down centrifuge and spin down slugs and know exactly what you have, and then be able to test your canning for cleanliness. Fine, but we've worked with breweries on these very types of projects, and even with those type of intense lab capabilities, running dirty products with clean products, issues. Anyway, on those in-house lab capabilities, we do a qPCR machine. We don't do plate testing at Ironheart, but the qPCR machine is great for us, for common spoilers and all kinds of assays that we run there as well. But having in-house lab capabilities to test those things are key. What we're trying to avoid, the one thing that you never want to see is the message on Instagram or on Facebook that says the can blew up. Obviously, it's unlikely that somebody could get injured, but I've seen injuries happen because of it as well. And then there's, beyond just a quality or a bad customer experience, you'd end up with litigation there. But cans do blow up. They'll rupture at 90 psi. They'll mushroom at 70 psi, as you see some cans in that lower section there as well. And that's usually from an over attenuating yeast or beer that wasn't terminal, or something that was put, in the cans with an adjunct that then kicked off a re-ferment. Right there, you see an ATP meter with a high reading of 290. That's very, very high. It's very, very, very dirty. A note, and the reason why I put this on here too is check your water source as well. After we work in hundreds of facilities, and we did a lot of work by just testing water sources that were coming to us. So what's the hose spigot off of the wall? What's that testing with an Aquasnap reading? And you'll be surprised that there is some high ROU readings, right? If your water's not being treated, or if the water is stale in the system for a little while and needs to be flushed. So just a tidbit there. You see mold. I hate seeing mold everywhere. Once again, the nose knows. And believe it or not, that thing in the gloved hand came from under the track of a canning line that we went and did maintenance on. So that's what we call schmoo, right? So there are some hard to clean places, and I know hopefully a lot of people are shaking their head that might be listening to this presentation, but that is a real thing that we've seen doing maintenance in a lot of different lines, and you got to get to those hard to reach places. I think that thing was alive, actually. All factors begin with beer preparation, but once we get the beer preparation right, you got to put it into cans, and that way, the goal here is obviously optimizing your fills, getting it in, to get consistency, right? Fill weights, we do it by weight. You calculate the correct weight, plus or minus 1.5%. If you get the beer spec correct, the filling operation is important. Couple notes I wanted to mention on fill weight. Overfilling cans to reduce the amount of headspace is not a fix for DO pickup. It might help you not have the worst DO in the world, but it's overfilling is not going to give you good DO. It might be a little bit of a shortcut, but not recommended, right? And of course, you never want shorts making it past pack out into finished goods. That's a bad customer experience, and also will not allow for good DO. As I mentioned before, good dissolved oxygen equals more difficult canning, not just send it. If you can see beer when you're putting the lids on, stop. You can have an issue. Check up, as you're running, test every single can for DO, know which fill heads, time to simmer. Your unshaken cans will be a good test of the liquid delivery system, right? So if there's an issue with a gasket or pickup from a valve or something in between the tank and the canning line, you should be able to pick that up with an unshaken can if you don't have the ability to test at the manifold. Otherwise, shake your cans, and that will test pickup from the filling operation. Rinsing and drying, I'll switch down to. got to get the exterior of a can clean. If not, not only will it be spotting of product drying on the can or mold growth, but external corrosion is the big one. One of the things you really have to watch out for is spray from a seamer or can fails. So you get a bad can, comes into the rinse tunnel, and then it squirts beer all over the cans around it. If it's a sour beer, if it's a porter, if it's a stout, now you have spots all over those other cans. If Packout doesn't pick them out, one bad apple can spoil the whole case, as I like to say. So very important for proper rinsing and drying. DO minimization, right? One of the things, of course, beer shouldn't look like that and it shouldn't taste like that. It's very rare, in my opinion, it's very rare that you're going to see an issue that's consistently all bad. It's the variability, once again, where you could get a couple of cans that taste as they should, and you can get a couple of cans that are obviously completely oxidized. Back to machine condition and standards of the operator. I can't say how important this is, but look, if you buy a used machine, you kind of know what you get. You got to get it back in shape. If you have a machine that's new, keep it maintained. If you're using a mobile operator, right, just expect them to have well-maintained and equipment that's in good shape. But, upkeep and preventative maintenance are what's going to keep your machine in its best condition. As I mentioned, consistency is the overriding factor. If there's an issue with the equipment that is going to cause inconsistency, you end up risking quality. So the happier the machine, the better the results you're going to get. But it all comes down, again, to the standard of the operator, not only their experience and their skill, but alignment with that importance, the importance of packaging, the philosophy that packaging is the gatekeeper to your brand and that you can only make the beer worse. If whoever is working with you, whoever's working for you, they need to have the attitude that the product running off the line is their product, whether it be a mobile operator or whether it be an employee, whoever's doing the canning. They're hanging their reputation on the quality of what's coming off of that canning line. And then I touched on label application. A well-applied label, crispy look, high standards for the package, just high standards for the brewery. That's what that communicates to the customer. A poorly applied label, one that's off kilter, one that has bubbles, that has a shabby look, and that communicates a lack of care to the customer. So a couple of things we're trying to avoid here when you see standards of the operator. You see at the top, there's a whole lineup of body wrap cans that have mechanical damage from the seamer. If those went through the line and had a label applied, you might not know the difference until one started leaking behind the label. Also, when you're having issues with those seamers, if the canning line operator is not catching them, there could be issues with those seams because the can wasn't spinning properly. Obviously, you need to get particulate out of the cans. This was a picture of what we suspected was a segment of an insect, right? That was in a can and likely did not get blown out or rinsed out of a can, right? So pre-rinsing of cans in the twist rinse, making sure that you're eliminating any particulate, hyper important. The condition of incoming cans, right? As a canning line operator, standards of the operator would be to never let these cans, that come in dirty like this be filled. Obviously know that we're putting a beverage into cans, and the picture on the left, obviously these pallets showed up very, very dirty with dust and rust all over it. We were in this case, we were given cans that actually had a mouse nest. So who knows how long they had been there. And then I showed, we had the dirty fill lines. So the fill lines should be clear. As an operator, you're standing there looking at those fill lines every single time you fill. Those need to be replaced. And the last three I'll group together and then should have some time for maybe answer a couple questions before we wrap. But archiving and testing program, this is where you take your can samples and your tank samples, if possible, and you hold them and you keep them for the desired shelf life of the beer, right? So if you date code and timestamp, which is another component of quality packaging, and you have an issue with your archived cans, or you have ones that mushroom or rupture, you can get ahead of an issue before it becomes before it gets out of hand. And if you're date coded and time stamped, oftentimes you can limit the impact of it as well. Repeatable SOPs and best practices, consistency, overriding factor, right? You can't have consistency if you don't have repeatable standard operating practices. So as any canning operation, packaging operation should have those documented so that they're repeatable. And the last one here is everybody involved in the process from front to back plays a role in quality. So, from the brewer to whoever's running the canning line, to the person that's pushing cans and loading empty cans and making sure that nothing dirty is getting in with the consumables or nothing is falling in the cans, right down to the person who is picking up the cans, and even if they're hand applying pack text or putting the cans into a case tray or palletizing, they're the last inspector on the line, and they have the last opportunity to find issues and flag them. So everybody has to have that attitude that we play a role in quality. Finally, can issues, damaged cans going in, right? Dented cans. I mentioned before, no fingers in cans that hit the floor, don't use them, throw them out. You see them being used. I know cutting costs and saving money is important, right? It's a business of pennies, but at the same time, what's the cost of a recall? What's the cost of a lost customer? It's not worth reusing cans that potentially were dirty. Dented cans, especially with sour beer or seltzers, a dented can will have an imperfection on the can liner on the inside of the can, and that is a very typical source point for internal corrosion, which then will cause a can to leak, which then could cause other problems in perfectly good inventory that's right next to it. So don't pop out dents. If the can's dented, it's unfortunately should be scrapped. Can handling post packaging. I mentioned before, one bad apple spoils the whole case. One bad apple could spoil the whole pallet. So keeping canned beer cool and dry, obviously, if you're cold storing, that's the best, right? But if you don't have the ability to cold store your product the whole time, let the pallets come up to temperature, let them sweat out, and then let them dry before shrink wrapping. Don't, especially in the middle of summer, shrink wrapping, ice cold beer that's going to sweat out. I've seen pallets months later that the cardboard was still moist because of the way that was handled. And then also realize can liner compatibility, right? Years ago, the first generation of BPA Gen 1 cans, acrylic liners came out. They were very, very problematic, especially for ciders, sours, fruited beers, wines, anything with a lower pH. There are still some in the market. I recommend staying away from them completely. Not worth it. BPA and I Gen 2 liners perform on par with, was the industry standard before BPA and I epoxy liners. But know what you're getting. And, especially for lower pH products that are higher risk, make sure that cans are compatible. And of course, we don't want to make can bombs because it is a package that can explode and can rupture. So be careful with your adjuncts. And I've mentioned that a couple of times. Make sure that the beer is terminal or that you're protecting your beer. There are plenty of producers, plenty of beer that we package that makes use of flash pasteurization or sorbates and sulfite to make sure that risk of continued fermentation or re-fermentation or continued fermentation is limited, right? So that it inhibits that from happening. Some just body wrap cans or dented cans that get into the canning line in the bottom center will cause a leak. Those leaks on pallets, they will spread, and you'll see all those pallets up top. That's a problem. DO minimization, we know, or dissolved oxygen at a high level does increase the corrosivity potential of liquids. So I know this is craft beer professionals, but work with a lot of breweries more now than ever that are launching an RTD cocktail or a batched beverage, right? Making sure that you're limiting dissolved oxygen in when you're ameliorating a product, or when you're in your batching water. High dissolved oxygen will cause corrosivity problems, especially in warm storage for those type of low pH products. Pay attention to all that, and you end up with a giant mess. And then second to bottom on the lower left, you just see mold and spotting from cans that were either stored wet or weren't rinsed well enough at the time of packaging. So, I'll go through this really quick because I know I'm out of time, but if you're using a mobile canning service provider, everything I just talked about should apply to them. They should guarantee their seams, they should guarantee their sanitation, and they should have the right attitude and philosophy. They should treat the product like it's their product, and they should have ownership of that finished product. It may be yours, but the quality of the canning is the reputation of the canner. And then real quick, sneak peek, but this is something very exciting. I'm glad I'm able to mention it the day before. It's not my goal to be salesy. I hope everything you hear was informative. So it's not a pitch, but something brand new for my company is a technical support and services program, which we're bringing to the market that, may have some benefits that could help alleviate some quality concerns, even for somebody running an in-house operation. And then I'd like to take some questions. I'm going to have to exit out of my presentation here to see Stage Yard, and I'll answer them if there is any time. Otherwise, I really appreciate you listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to me speak, and I thank you for your time. Oh, so of course, now here I'm seeing the how would you suggest vetting mobile canning companies? Definitely, my recommendation is they should be able to provide documentation of their processes. You should ask the right questions, and they should be able to give you maybe not their SOP, right? Because that could be proprietary, but they should be able to give you facility requirements and a QC pack, right? Which details their filling process, their methodology, what products they use for CIP, how they verify it, right? Most mobile canning companies, their first run with a new customer, it might be their first packaging run ever, right? So they should approach a new customer onboarding from the perspective that they need to be a consultant, and that they need to put a lot of work and planning into making that first canning run go as smooth as the future 20th canning run or 40th canning run, right? A lot has to come together: beer spec, preparation, and then execution of packaging on canning day. So once again, they should be able to provide documentation, and they should guarantee their seams, guarantee sanitation, and be able to do all the quality checks that I had discussed earlier. Hope that answers your question. Looks like actually I've gone over time a little bit, so thank you very much. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to listen to me today. Cheers.